Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the Peer Spotlight webinar with George Washington University on measuring outcomes and reporting ROI. We're going to get started in a moment. We're still trying to figure out some technical difficulties with our panelists. If you could hold tight for us, we'll get right back to you. Thanks for your patience. Shari, do we have you back? Still working through some technical difficulties. While we're doing that, I will share a little bit about the presentation. So welcome everyone. My name is Carlos Moncada. Thanks for joining us today for this Peer Spotlight webinar with Shari Thompson from George Washington University, the George Washington University, on measuring outcomes and reporting ROI. I mentioned before that we're working through some technical difficulties, so we'll get through that. Before we get started, I just want to share a few things up front, just a little bit more about InfraReady, if you're not fully aware of all the features, functionality, and services we provide. So one great thing about InfraReady is that it empowers administrators to use the system and not have to rely on IT to set things up for you. Another great thing, and this is really important for this topic as well, is that you can create your own templates, which contribute to standardized data across the board to improve your reporting. So Shari's going to cover reporting and metrics a little bit today, so that's definitely going to be relevant for those of you who are interested in the topic. A few other things to note about the InfraReady platform. You can run unlimited number of competitions, collect an unlimited number of applications, and can have that done through different administrators. So using templates definitely helps in that situation if you have multiple administrators. On top of all of that, the data is all in one place. So you can get overall aggregate data, or you can also look at subsets of the data as needed. The last thing to note is that InfraReady can get set up fairly quickly, as fast as 2 weeks. If you have more things that need to be set up, it can take a little longer, but we've definitely had people set up very quickly in the past. So some notes on how InfraReady is used. This is a really long list of what we call use cases. You can see that InfraReady is used throughout institutions in a wide variety of ways. And that points to the flexibility of the system grants administrators when they're setting up their process. Because it could be a funding opportunity. It could be form collection for an approval process. It could be a competitive process where you're reviewing individual applications and based on their merit and weighing them against one another. So several different ways to use InfoReady. Let us know if you have any questions or would like a copy of this page right here. Also wanted to share a little bit about the logistics for today. So the webinar is scheduled for 60 minutes. We're already 6 minutes in, apologies for that. So we got about 20 minutes for the presentation, and the bulk will be Q&A with the panelists. Folks submitted some questions during registration. And if you have additional questions as we go through the webinar, please submit them using the Q&A feature. And then we'll answer as many of them as we can. The webinar is also being recorded, so we'll share the cleaned up version of the webinar in the next week or so. We'll send that out to everyone who registered, and that link you can share it with other colleagues on your end as well. There's also a post-webinar survey that will pop up when we close things out today. Feel free to share your feedback with us. We'll also have a couple poll questions that pop up throughout the webinar. Now, let's check in on our panelists. Hopefully, we've gotten through the technical difficulties. Shari, are you with us? Still trying. Thanks everyone for your patience. We'll share a little bit about Shari. You can see a little profile of her here. As mentioned, Shari's with the George Washington University. She's been using InfoReady for over 5 years now, and focused on limited submissions and other internal funding programs. And we thank Shari for joining us today. She has quite the resume, and she is very passionate about data. So you can see that based on her resume, and she's works closely with administration at George Washington to ensure that the data they're collecting can be translated into metrics that are reported up the organization. She's going to expand on that during this presentation. Hopefully we get the audio fixed. And while we're waiting on that, I would be happy to answer other questions about InfoReady. So if you have any, please submit those. And I would be happy to show some things and in the platform if necessary. And I can also share a little bit more about the general functionality about progress reports. We actually have a training webinar in a couple, on October 11th. We have a training webinar where we'll go in depth on using InfoReady for progress reports, but we'll actually be starting from the point where you're entering the award decision in InfoReady. And you can collect information, enter information there on the award screen where you enter that decision. And so what the process looks like for setting up the progress report forms, kind of the approach and mentality, and
Can you hear me?
you might want to set it up. Shari's back. We have an echo.
I'm muting my computer. Hold on. How's that?
That sounds great. Thank you, Shari.
Okay.
Oh,
Now I can hear you through my phone.
Let me add one quick thing. That webinar in October pairs nicely with this webinar, so definitely keep that in mind. Shari, the floor is yours.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, InfoReady Nation, and thank you for hanging in there with me as I fixed my audio issues. We did log on early to do this, and we've been working at it ever since. Thank you so much. Let me get to my presentation. I'm so glad to share my information with you. Let me
Shari? Shari, the floor is yours. Everyone, I'd like to present Shari Thompson from the George Washington University.
Thank you. All right. Anyway, let me exit the screen. Well, next slide. I, of course, work at the George Washington University, as Carlos spoke about. And just to give you a little bit of information on how we are set up, I am, and I do mean the only person who is the Research Enhancement Unit. And I work from a centralized office in the office of the Vice Provost for Research. So I work over the entire university. And I, of course, help support faculty with their research and scholarly efforts. One of the things that I do, and I like to tout it as such, is I am the subject matter expert on pre-award activities. I am also the pivot funding database administrator for the entire university. And just like with InfoReady, I'm the subject matter expert on it, and I liaison with, of course, Carlos here at InfoReady, as well as Pivot, and I train faculty and staff on how to use these platforms 3 times in the fall and 3 times in the summer. I do run all of the limited submission competitions for the university, and I am designated a super administrator for InfoReady. So I have powers that an administrator may not have, but for what I'm going to tell you, you really don't need superpowers to do it. Now, our leadership, along with our OVPR program manager, who serves as our sole global administrator, they actually set up the InfoReady platform for us. And we are structured as 3 microsites. We have a microsite, which is OVPR. We are the major owner of InfoReady. We also have the Columbian College of Arts and Sciences. They're a microsite, as well as the Center for Undergraduate Fellowships and Research. I train everyone who's an administrator in my office, of which there are 2 people currently now as administrators, as well as anyone from these other 2 microsites on how to use InfoReady. We do not have a whole cadre of administrators across campus using it or anything like that. We are very tight closed, and if anybody needs to use it, which we haven't heard that so far, except for CCAS, because they run a lot of internal competitions on their own, I would be the one that would help them set up and train any staff on how to do that. So it's very tightly closed, and we're able to control how it's used and implementation of nomenclature and systems. And I always implement new functionalities and capabilities throughout these 3 microsites. Next slide. So, do intramural funding programs and projects and project reports, do they really matter? Well, I can offer some insight into this because I started using InfraReady back, we were launching in May of 2017. So that summer I was learning it. So that fall I could start teaching faculty and staff how to use it as applicants and reviewers, et cetera. I had 1.5 years with an administrator who was actually running intramural competitions, and it was a nightmare. Only because she left and I was left to do it by myself for the next year. This isn't anything that I regularly do. And for those of you who do run intramural competitions, I know you're saying, cry me a river, I do this all the time, but when it's new to you, trust me, it is certainly a massive undertaking when you're trying to deal with the platform as well as run these programs. At the time, I believe it was FY19, we were running 2 intramural competitions, and we're talking hundreds of applications, and it was only me. And I was exhausted after all was said and done. I mean, I felt like I had engaged in some physical labor out in the sunshine. I was just worn out, and I could barely do any of my other tasks for that entire year, which was noted by leadership because that's how much effort it takes to run intramurals. So one day I went to my boss and I said, what do we get for this? Now, clearly, I did understand about indirect cost recovery back to the institution when you do external grants and get awarded based upon these pilot studies they do in intramurals. But do we really know if we get that back based upon what we award out? Do we really know if all this work is going on? And not just the research side, but the scholarly side as well. Well, my odyssey began after I ran those 2 competitions. I said, now this is a science person in me. I am a microbiologist, virologist, so I had questions and I needed answers. So the odyssey began, and I decided to send out a little Excel spreadsheet to those awardees from FY17 and 18, just asking, hey, what did you do with the money you got from these intramural awards? And I was surprised that I got a lot of answers back, and they were surprised that I even asked. Because at that time, there wasn't a requirement to report what you did. But a lot of, what I read in terms of scholarly work and research work literally gave me goosebumps. It was just that good. So I reported back to my boss what I got on this spreadsheet in terms of what did you do? What research did you develop? What research did you forward? Did you submit any external proposals to federal agencies? Did you get any awards? And I was stunned. One person, I think that was awarded maybe $10,000 at the time, got an NSF grant for $12.5 million, just based upon pilot work that they had done. Well, my curiosity hackles were definitely just at the top of my head, and I needed to know more. So this is making me feel just a little better about how exhausted I was after the FY19 year, and I had to do that by myself. So do intramural funding programs and project reports really, really matter? Well, these are the answers to my questions. Now, for those of you, next slide. For those of you who are novices to InfraReady, you find you can access progress reports. If you're creating a new competition, it's always it's under the create tile. You just scroll down the menu as you see on the left-hand side, progress reports, and you'll see this wonderful default progress report that InfraReady has made for you. I urge you to go in and look at that closely and see if any of what's required in these forms speaks to you, speaks to what you need to know, speaks to what your bosses in leadership, whether you be a department level, school level, or centralized like I am. See if any of those speak to you, because they're very easy to edit and change. All you do is delete them on the right-hand side, or if the form, such as text box versus text field or yes or no, fits what you want to know, then you can just edit your question as you see fit. Next slide. Now, when you look at my intramural progress reports for FY23, you see one right here. Yes, there are 6. You're not going crazy. I actually have 6 that I do for our intramural competitions. And why do I do this? Because again, I want answers. I want hard numbers as to what our faculty are doing. I know it's not just wanting money for, to cover summer salaries. I got that from my first little tickling of what they had accomplished back in FY18 and 19. They are really working hard. So I have 6 project reports, and no, we're not going to go through all 6. There's no need. So I have 2 major reports. One is the no-cost extension interim project reports. And for those of you who are new to the intramural research enterprise, as it were, faculty can request a no-cost extension to extend the deadline in which they complete their project. As we all know, because we were all affected by COVID, travel was restricted. It was hard hiring people during that period of time. So an intramural project that would have normally ended July 30th, a lot of people needed to extend it like 8 months out because they couldn't travel. And even that was tenuous at the time because we didn't know back in 2020 where this pandemic was going to go. But even outside of the pandemic, there are reasons why faculty might need to request a no-cost extension. And just as an aside, we do have our no-cost extension request in InfraReady. So people have to apply for any, and this is for intramural competitions only because that's all we have control of. And they can request a no-cost extension. It gets reviewed, it gets approved or rejected. And here's a tip for those who don't know. If on that intramural competition, if you are notified to receive, when something is awarded, you will receive an email that a no-cost extension interim, that a no-cost extension was approved if you have that indication in your no-cost extension platform on InfraReady. So you don't have to always keep checking. You will get the notification when something is approved, which is really, really wonderful. And the next project report I have, which is now required, we started making them required in FY19, is the year-end project report. I call that year 0. So they get awarded, they start their work July 1st, it ends on June 30th of the following year, and the project report is due by the end of August. The other 4 progress reports you can see, these are for longitudinal collection of data. If something should happen with the initial funding, if it expanded, you never know. I give them the option of filling out to update us for 4 subsequent years after the funding report. And that's really important because most of the time there's not a solicitation out right when somebody finishes their intramural competition. It may not come around until next year. So if you don't capture that data, you still will not know what happened with that money in the intramural program and did it really plant seeds for the future. You would have no idea unless you do it longitudinally. Next slide. So let me show you. This is my no-cost extension interim project report. What we have them to do is very simple. There's the little instructions at the very top. There's basically 3 steps. If you're approved, it's only for those who are approved, clearly, then you give me the new deadline date. And at the bottom, you would upload your no-cost extension interim progress report if you want to upload it. And all I ask is that you tell us what you have accomplished. Just list it out, 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't need paragraphs, I don't need pages, just a quick, I accomplished this, and some right, and this is what I want to do throughout the extension, which is fine. And they have to upload the actual approval, which they receive through InfraReady, since this is how we receive no-cost extension requests. I also ask that they upload the actual approval. Now, this interim report is due on the original due date, which again is the end of August every year. Now, this is really pivotal to get this information because once I have the new deadline date, then I can assign the year-end project report to meet that new deadline date. So I'm not assigning them an August date when it's not going to be until the following June. I don't want to send them those notifications accidentally. So let me talk about this standardized progress report form that I've developed. I think this is my 8th iteration. Next slide. So my very next project report is the one that you saw that was for FY23. I collect soft numbers now as well as hard numbers. And what do I mean by soft numbers? There are things that I just will ascribe a 1 or 0 to. And this has come about because we have gotten such great feedback on project reports since we started to actually require them, and people are actually sending them in, and I'm actually reading them, and I actually comment back to faculty. And so meaning OVPR, asked me to insert some other questions just to get some information for other offices within OVPR. We have an office of marketing and creative services, and I sit next to our senior associate of communications, and this is something he is over. So he used to ask me, Shari, when you read these reports, do you get any information about whether they use GW resources of creative marketing and, of marketing and creative services? I said, no, I don't, I've never seen that. Or he asked me once, do you know if they actually do public outreach in some of these, like have community meetings? I said, I have read that. So to help him out, I decided to ask the questions about both of those in my progress report. So I'm not looking for hard numbers, just did you do it or did you not do it? Did you use marketing and creative services to make a website or beautiful illustration for publications? Yeah, you know, so you get a 1 if you did, you get a 0 if you didn't. Did you, in the course of this intramural funding, did you have meetings with the general public to educate them, show them things? If you have 4, 5, 6, I don't really care. I just put a 1 for yes and a 0 for no. I just really want to know that. And typically these things will be answered later on in my progress report anyway. Another question that recently came up, I want to say a month ago, which is why this is about my 8th iteration of the standardized project report, is for intellectual property. I've always had a question on my progress report is, was your research or writing or key events significant, or did they have broader impacts? You would think everybody would say yes, but actually most say no. And so if you say yes, and a lot of them like to write a little bit about what that is, then I give them a 1. If they don't have anything there, then I just put 0 or none if they indicate none. So these are soft numbers that I am looking at just so I can tell leadership, well, out of 34 awardees, actually 5 had really significant work. And then so after the question about significant, I actually added, did you communicate with GW Telecommunications and Technology Office about discoveries, innovations, wanting to partner with outside entrepreneurs and things of that nature? I'm not looking to gather that data because, again, there's an office that does that. But as you all know, when you're dealing with faculty, you have to train them. You have to put things in front of them that they need to consider. So if they have a discovery, say a new assay or diagnostic tool, 2 years down the road, but it was based upon this intramural funding initially, they will know, hey, I should probably talk to tech commercialization about what I found, so they can file papers and I can go out and talk about it, and our IP is protected. So those I just added maybe a month ago, and I think I've got this pretty much standardized now. I don't see any more changes forthcoming, but these are soft numbers. And of course, changes in personnel. Of course, with COVID, there are people that left institutions, moved to different institutions. We want to make sure key personnel, if there's outside partners or collaborators that have been added, we want to know that. So I capture that, as well as, do you have any other intramural funding? We want to capture that as well. So in my progress reports, these are easy things for faculty to answer. They don't have to do a deep dive to go get data and insert it. Next slide. But the next slide is where I capture what I call hard numbers. Now, in my instructions for this progress report, I say that, and this is for the no-cost extension one too, in red, there is always that sentence, quote, non-compliance to give us a progress report may negatively impact any applications you currently have pending for funding or even future applications. So therefore, I'm making sure they know that this is looked at. And if they want their compliance to be status good, you want to make sure you get those reports in now, because we are following up. And if you have an application pending, that you may not get funded if you show that you have not submitted your progress reports as required. So here's where I capture my hard numbers in terms of that will make me feel good after that year. I was exhausted for having to do this. So how many conferences and presentations, meetings did you have? So they will actually write out the title, the sponsor, et cetera, et cetera. Then we have publications, writings, books, the same thing. They give me a nice, sometimes hyperlink to chapters. They let me know what they accomplished based upon the funding that they received. Other events, key results, museum installations, performances, whatever you want to write there. They might have one, they might have none. They list it out. And then, of course, external funding submissions. Who did you submit to? Who did you submit to? In what amount did you request? And give me the ID through our Huron, which is my research profile, is the submission. And then, of course, what external awards did you get? And again, I want that same information, so I can always look it up if it's pending. Well, not pending at this point, but if it's awarded, I can always check if I want to. And lastly, what's your future plans for funding? And now, of course, that pivots back to me because I am the pivot administrator as well, and I do help faculty find funding. They ask me to set up profiles for them to find to find funding and all of that. So this is where I capture the hard numbers. But back to my instructions, I do tell them in these text boxes, do not write "see uploaded report," because I let them know we are using these fields to really capture data, because the data we capture will inform leadership on whether we should expand our intramural programs and what levels should they be funded. And so when I first started this, some people would just say, see the attached report or see the uploaded report. And I would say, no, you have to go back and you need to pull this out. Early on, when I first started this, I was sitting there reading a lot of reports, and this was at the top of the pandemic. I was reading these reports, pulling out this data myself because I knew what they were doing was pivotal, and I wanted it to go on even through the pandemic because it was really important work. It elevated the institution. The research was stellar, the writing was incredible, and I was making all these pivot tables and charts to show that to leadership, which we'll get to in just a second. So these are the fields that I have, and this is my standardized progress report. For every intramural competition, this is a report that faculty will see. Again, we like to train faculty. They know what to expect in terms of progress reports as they do their work. They know what's going to be asked, because it is all the same for each and every one. For those post-award progress reports that you saw when I showed you that I had 6, it is the same report. The difference between this one, the difference between the year-end and the post-award, on this one, every field is required. There's no optional fields on the year-end project report. If they didn't have anything to report, they have to at least enter none. On the optional ones that are the longitudinal informational updates, everything is optional. And I just invite them to update. If you have anything to update, please do. And you would be surprised how much I get back from them, because they do like to let us know, hey, 2 years later, I got this big NSF grant and it's for billions of dollars. And they really do like to write that and let us know. And then they're like, thank you, intramural competition. And I actually do save those testimonials for leadership as well when they write in their report, or let me know that they're very thankful for Intramural Funding for allowing them to do this and then ultimately get such great funding. Next slide. For those of you who don't know how to access your progress report data, this is how you do it. You open up the requisite competition, you scroll down to the application table at the bottom, which is look under overview section, and you'll see download report. Click download report, and then you'll see the dialog box that you currently have here on the screen. Make sure you click application and application details, all fields. You must do that. And once you do that, click download selected reports, and your progress report will be the last tab on the right of the Excel spreadsheet once they download. Next slide. This is an example of that. So this is what, so I downloaded one of my reports, and you can see my standardized project report headers all right there. And of course, underneath there, all the faculty would have entered information, which of course I just blacked out. And so you would have all, everything you needed right then, right then and there. And on those tabs, you can see the ones that are open here. Oops, I keep moving my own slides in a different manner, throwing myself off. I have multiple tabs because I have multiple project reports. And as those are completed, I will have, the fields will have information in them. So you see the no cost extension report there, and this is the one, this is a year in report. Then you have post award year 1, 2, 3, 4. And clearly for some of those, there's nothing there yet because they're not assigned and there's no data. But what I do when I need to build a new project report in an intramural competition, I literally just open this field, which I have saved on my computer, and at the top in the field box where the top arrow is, I literally just copy and paste that language onto the progress report form. So I'm not typing this all the time, and I know they're all text boxes except for the one question about did you communicate with tech commercialization. That's the only yes or no, and I have, and of course the upload field. So it takes literally 3 or 4 minutes to build my project report form, because again, it's standardized. I'm not changing anything. The wording is perfect. So that's what I suggest you do. It makes it very simple. And now we get to some of the data I collected and what I do with that data. So what I would do is under conferences and presentations, I would look at what they have written, and I would just copy and paste the row. Now, I have already sorted this out from the IRDY application ID, low number to high number. That's how I always sort my Excel spreadsheets, from the IRDY application ID number, low to high. So I always know the order on these 2 reports that I do. So then I just copy that field, and then next slide, I paste it into my master data table. This is just an Excel spreadsheet because I want to make pivot tables and charts for leadership. So when they have presentations, it looks pretty, it's movable, it's interactive, it's fun to look at. And again, it's just my master data table. I have one of these for each of my intramural competitions, UFF, CDRF, now we have HFF, USS, and we do have special ones as well for special projects. It might be cybersecurity. It could be like COVID-19, something that's relevant in the world that we want to do an intramural competition for. But this is how it looks. On the left-hand side are those colored lines. That's fiscal year. The no color at the bottom was like FY17, and this orange is FY18, the yellow is FY19, et cetera, et cetera. And then you see those same headers with all the text from my progress report. That's where everything is collected. If this were active, I would move to the right-hand side, and you would see that it goes from funding year 0, and then those same questions would be post-award year 1 in a light shade of blue, and then post-award year 2 in a darker shade of blue, post-award year 3 in yet a darker shade of blue, and post-award year 4 in yet a darker shade of blue. So everything is lined up on this one master data table. And this is just for one intramural competition, and it goes through all the years, starting from FY17 to current, and I add on to it. And then, of course, when it comes to the numbers, which is what you need for pivot tables, so if they have 8 conferences, under conferences, meetings, presentations, I put 8. If they have nothing there, of course, there's a 0. You have to have something in every field to make a pivot table and chart. So I go through and I actually look at these, and then I count and I just describe the numbers. The green and the red you see in the center are things that may have been pending a decision or something that I just needed to check in my research to see what the status was, and that I updated at some later time. But so this is the master table that I collect everything on. Next slide. And this is an example of a pivot table and chart for those who may not be numbers people. I can geek out on numbers all day, but I know some may not like that. Some may not like to do that, which is fine too, to each his own. But if you want a nice presentation of pivot tables, this is a good one. So you can see that I have blue column and an orange column. The blue column is an example of what we may have provided in terms of FY17, in terms of intramural funding for this one competition. So this is a pivot table for just UFF. And then were you to see what we got back in that funding year, that would be the orange bar, which was what, let me see, we gave out 252,000 and we got back $294,000 in that first year. Now, those aren't the out years, that's just year zero. This is when the progress report is mandatory, so we can see what's going on. The out years, it turns out to be more actually, and you'll see that in just a second. So on this pivot table, where on the right-hand side, you see FY 17, 18, 19, 20. If you were to click on each of these, then these bars and numbers will correspond to that data from that master data table. So I built the calculations of the formula to translate from the master data table to this pivot table. So it's all in one Excel spreadsheet, it's just a different tab at the bottom. So next slide. And this again is showing UFF FY17. This is the outcomes. Again, it's not always about money, it's about writing, publications, elevating the institutions through different mechanisms as well, performances, museum installations. So again, this is a pivot table that shows conferences, presentations, publications, other events. Did they submit for external funding and was it granted? Now, the best thing about a pivot table too is that anybody who's interested in seeing what these numbers are made of, like conferences and presentations, you can't see the number there. I think it was like 14 or something like that. You can go to the upper right-hand corner and you can click on that descriptor and you get this drop-down box and it shows you what comprises that number. So anybody doing a presentation for, say, Faculty Senate or something, and they're like, let's see what presentations, come under this, you can quickly scan and scroll down. Best thing about pivot tables is that they're interactive. Next slide. And again, so this is the third tab. This is showing cumulative monetary. So this is longitudinal data for FY17. You can see what came back from year zero, post-award year 1, 2, 3, and when I made this slide, this was before I ever did 4, but 4 is now there. So this is one way to present the metrics you've captured, which I think is really nice. Now, another way to present, and this was actually a request to me from the provost office, because we have a new vice provost of research, because I showed her this, and she's like, well, she doesn't want to go through all that. She just wants a quick view that she can access at any time to give her a baseline of what's going on. So next slide. So I developed this report for leadership decisions. And this, again, is just another Excel spreadsheet with 2 tabs. And one, the green tab at the bottom, is called a return on investment, ROI, by fiscal year. And then, of course, I'm showing you, again, UFF. So again, from that master data table I showed you from the other Excel spreadsheet, I just copy the numbers that I ascribed to those metrics captured into this table. It's all about the money and about the numbers and what came back on the far right-hand side. And again, I don't try and squint and figure out who did what. I just copy and paste the whole table when I know, the whole column when I know there's an update on something. You don't want to sit there and try and figure out, now what row is that and how can I find it? Just go back to your master data table and copy and paste that entire fiscal year, that information, if you know an update has been had or been offered, and then just paste it into this. And again, so the headers are the same. You've got your conferences, your publications, your other events and key results, and then you've got the number of submissions for external funders, the number that were awarded, and those amounts. Same thing. But that's just, I call this the working table. So under FY17 would be FY18, and then that would be FY19. So it just goes on and on and on and on and on. So the next slide is actually what leadership wants to see. So this is a report that feeds from the data that I just showed you. And again, I put the formulas on this report. So this is FY17 table, you see UFF, and then you also have the number of awardees and the number of project report respondents. So there were 27 awardees back in FY17, and for award year 0, there were 15 people who actually gave me information about what they did with the money, even without having an official project report at the time. And again, we gave out like $252,000. And again, in that year 0, we got back 294. And then, of course, you see the information as I followed it longitudinally. So this is very simple to look at. And even today, if somebody says, oh, I forgot to give you this from UFF FY17, and I want to add it to my updates, I can just easily just put the number in, and then this table will change accordingly because it's all based upon formulas from the working table that's next to it. So you can see, so by year 4, we've gotten back 5.6 million based upon an investment of 252,000. So not too bad. If you were to scroll down this table, you would also see our other 3 intramural competitions from FY17. And then the next set of tables, which would be colored, would have a different colored background, would be 4 intramural competitions that we started. And then the next one would have 5 because we actually had some specialty ones. So they're all the same, and this is for leadership to make decisions. Next slide. I did want to mention that I do get a notification through InfoReady when a progress report is submitted. So always make sure that you do have that notification when something is awarded checked off, and make sure your email address is there. I say that because maybe you're not the person who wants to put all these pivot tables and charts together. That may not be your thing, which I understand. It might be somebody else. You might want to put their email address in their other administrator to receive when, when an application has been awarded. So they get this. And of course, these competitions are closed, so there's no new applications coming in. This is after everything is said and done. So they would get a notification to view the progress reports, and they can pull out that information and graph it out as appropriate to what might be needed. So make sure that that is checked. Next slide. And again, this is my compliance check sheet. As I said, when I do get notifications that a no-cost extension has been approved, I immediately pop up my spreadsheet for compliance, which shows whether somebody's outstanding and they're reporting. If it's in red, that's not good. If it's in blue, if it's in black, then they have either submitted an interim report or their final report has been approved, which is all done by me. And I put budget amounts that were awarded, and then what's back on their expense report, which I do make them upload as a year-end requirement. You must give me an expense report. That's part of the progress report at the bottom. You must upload that, and if you don't, then you get a partial in terms of compliance until you get me that report. So this is how we do compliance. And since, again, if you get notifications through InfoReady and you do your no-cost extensions through that, it's quick and simple to just go in and update that quickly. Next slide. So this is project report buy-in. So how did I get the PIs to buy in? Well, first of all, it heralds their research and scholarly efforts. They love talking about their work because, they love writing, they love teaching. So anytime they can tell me what's going on or tell anybody what's going on, they really do enjoy that. And the use of the standardized form makes it so easy for them. They know what to expect. There's no big surprises. It's easy for them to fill out, copy and paste. And again, if they love to write, which a lot of them do, they love to upload the text. And particularly for some topics like physics, where they have all these symbols, it really doesn't copy and paste well in text box. So I always let them upload because the formatting of what they write is so complicated. And of course, for PI, it also ensures consideration for future funding, for future intramural funding applications. So how did I get leadership to buy into this? Well, you can imagine how ecstatic they were with things that I had found for them, and that they could do a deep dive and actually look into it deeper through the pivot tables and charts, or through my progress reports that I do through IRDY. So it demonstrates the PIs are being compliant, because again, we're using this mechanism of intramural competition to train some of the early faculty to get ready for the processes that are used in external competitions, because of course you have to do progress reports when you're getting federal grants and all that. So we like to keep it along that same line. Although I'm a little nicer and I don't just reject things. If something's wrong, instantly I'll send them back and say, you've got to fix this, this is not right. But we try to train them. And secondly, it informed leadership about intramural program continuation. And at what level do they want to fund them? If they're going to get big return on investment, they might want to fund more people at 100% versus maybe instead of breaking it down in terms of funding, or put more money into it. It offers a quick evaluation of the impact of both research and scholarly efforts, because again, I get back from them what they offered out, and I can always check to make sure it's there, because I have access to my research and their scholarly works as well. And lastly, for you and me and all of those administrators out there, it supports administrative time and effort. And I will say, as time well spent, because this is one of my favorite things to do. But again, I'm a numbers geek, so just delving into the numbers and looking to see what actually comes from it just makes me ecstatic. Next slide, please. So this is my InfoReady wish list. What do I want InfoReady to do in terms of progress report, modification, functionality, whatever the case may be? Well, I don't know if this is on the board or not, but I would love to be able to accept or return a report, because again, trying to train new faculty early career, if they forget something, or I'd like to be able to send it back and say, you forgot this, please upload it. Secondly, to actually allow us as their customers to establish a default form, which I would definitely have my form as a default form. That would be fabulous to do. And because again, I don't always plan to be doing this. I will have some help at some point, because I cannot do everything by myself all the time, and let somebody else do it. And I don't want them to have to build it. It's already built. I just want them to use it. And have a dedicated notification for a progress report is submitted. And I only say that because I was wondering why I was getting these notifications from progress reports, and then I figured it out. So it would just make it clear to have a dedicated notification for that, so I can be made aware that something is there, even though it does come through the awarding one. But it's just kind of nebulous to me the way that came through. Last slide. I know I was talking fast. And thank you all for your time and attention. And I hope this gives you just some thought of how maybe you should think about collecting any type of information that might help you and your leadership run intramural competitions better, more efficiently, and actually know that your effort you put in this enterprise is really worth it, because your faculty, as well as my faculty, they really do work hard and they love being acknowledged for it. And then maybe you can link up with your communications people when you read something that's coming through that's fascinating. They might want to interview the faculty for it. And definitely teach faculty about intellectual property and needing to connect with their technology commercializations offices as well. So thank you all very, very much. And I do apologize for all the issues we had at the top of the talk. That's it. I know I spoke really, really fast.
Thanks, Shari, for the presentation. Some great information there. And we have a few questions that were submitted. We're short on time. I think we're going to be able to get to about 3 questions here. So first question, how do you ever encounter, and how do you manage and avoid year-to-year duplicate entries, because you have multiple forms there?
Oh, well, because I do look at them all. And then when you put them on your master data table, I generally hide forms that are not used yet. I mean, I hide columns that aren't used yet. It's very easy to see. I mean, it's very easy to see if something is duplicated or not. Now, I mean, if somebody had 4 conferences in one year and 4 conferences in another, the year of those conferences should be different. But I can honestly say through the years I've been doing this, I haven't had that problem with anyone at this point. But I do read them. And then if I make my pivot tables and charts, I'm like, this is exactly the same because I'm putting the same number by the same number from last year. Yeah, that has yet to happen.
Okay, that's
But
good to
I
hear.
would just send it back and say, I think you sent me your data from last year. That's what I would say that to the faculty. This data is exactly the same data as last year. Please send me the update. So I'm always very nice about things. So I'm just assuming it may have been an accident.
That's very charitable of you, Shari. Another question for you. How do you manage deadlines and reminders for the progress reports?
Oh, well, of course, because now they know we're actually looking at them because they get feedback from me, because I will thank them for submitting their progress report so they know. But again, if it's something is really, really late, and I'll say, as those instructions say, as well as the initial call for proposal, the year-end report is required. That's pretty much all it takes. And if you have an application pending for new funding, it not having done your report will negatively impact your ability to get that funding. So once you get past that for 1 year, they understand that this is what's required, and they just do it. So once I got them used to that, which again took 1 year, then it's fine. They'll just put it in.
Getting accustomed to a process is definitely part of it.
Oh yeah.
So we had quite a few questions about no-cost extensions, and one of the questions I want to ask you is how you decided to use progress reports to collect no-cost extensions as opposed to maybe setting up a separate competition to collect no-cost extension requests.
We don't. We have a separate competition for that. That's what I said. It's separate. And so once it's approved, but I want the PI to take the responsibility of letting the intramural side know about it. So it is a separate competition.
Oh, thanks for clearing that up. I misunderstood that.
Yes.
So
it's completely separate.
For everyone, she sets up a separate competition for that. And we heard in a webinar sometime last year, another panelist said they set up a separate competition to collect no-cost extensions as well. And I could.
Yeah. And that's because we have like 4 or 5 intramural competitions, and when somebody is making a decision on whether or not to approve, you want to be able to sort by that PI's name and see if they have a history of requesting these things, and then if they've been meeting those deadlines in the past. So that's why we have a separate portal for no-cost extensions. But the reason why it's important for the PI to put it in their progress report is because we do want that information to move along with that application for that competition as well. So if anybody 10 years from now wants to see what this faculty was doing, they don't have to go, let me see, oh, okay, they asked for no cost extension through COVID. That makes sense. So it's all right there together in that one, as I like to call, InfoReady. Everything is in its own separate folder, apart from the external request. And they don't know that I look at it all. It could be 3 different people for all they know. I don't tell them. You don't tell them because, again, I wasn't doing it before COVID, but now I'm doing it now because we had staffing issues. So again, it's their responsibility to let Intramural know that they were approved and to give me the requisite information. So that's how I set the progress report assignments based upon a new deadline.
Thanks for that added detail. I think that helps some of the folks listening in. Mm-hmm. One thing I'll add is that other panelist was from UT Southwestern Medical Center. for anyone who's interested, we can share a link to that webinar and that recap as well, in addition to Shari's discussion here, so that you have a couple perspectives on collecting no-cost extensions with InfoReady.
Yeah, we once thought about for individual intramural competitions, but then it's hard to compare a PI over competitions over time because it's too spread out. Whereas if it's in one, then you just download the data and you can sort by name, and you have all that person's name, like Thompson, is all right there together. You can see the history.
It's certainly helpful when you don't have to chase data.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So we're at the end of our time here. I really do want to thank you, Shari, for giving us such a detailed and helpful presentation today. I'm sure everyone on the call really appreciated it as well. Thanks everyone for your time and patience today as we got through the technical issues. And thanks for hanging us in there to get to this great presentation. We recorded the session. We'll clean up the recording, and we'll send a follow-up email with that, and also the presentation slides, because several people mentioned that they were really interested in seeing the types of questions that Shari asked in her progress reports.
If anybody wants to contact me, they can, since my email is on the last slide. You can email me. I'm always happy to help people.
Yes, thanks so much. Really appreciate that. On top of that, we do have a follow-up. We have a post-webinar survey. If you want to submit additional questions and comments, we'd love for you to do that. And then if you do have any questions for us, I have next slide shows some contact information. Some of you asked about using InfoReady, from a training perspective on setting up progress reports. We've got a webinar coming up on October 11th. So check that out if you're interested. Here's some contact information on screen. One's for my colleague, Max Dinerman. My contact information is there, as well as the support team as well. And if there's nothing else, thanks everyone for your time. I know we're a couple of minutes over. You've been wonderful. Have a great day. Have a good week.
Bye all.
Bye, everyone.